Yes, Irma is here.
Okay.
Patience is here. Good
Good.
morning.
Gracias. Thank you. Good. Well, if I may, since I'm a believer in trying to start on time, remind you just to welcome everyone to our virtual informal meeting of the Peace Building Commission. I'd like to go over a few housekeeping notes. I'll introduce myself again. I'm Bob Ray. I'm the Canadian ambassador, but I've been here for 4 weeks, so I can no longer say I'm new. I'm old. But as we would normally be webcast as an open meeting of the PBC, we will be recording the meeting and posting the video on the PBSO website for interested observers. I'm going to remind all participants to sign in with their name and mission affiliation. And this is important, to keep your microphones on mute if you are not speaking. It makes, I noticed even now that, we've caught it. Sometimes we get extraneous sounds from somewhere because people have got their mics on. So please shut them off. Once the briefers have concluded their presentations, we're going to open the floor to member states. The speakers list is now open, and I would kindly request all missions to use the chat function to request the floor. As per the usual practice, we will build the speakers list on the basis of protocol and the requests for the floor. Colleagues, I just want to say to all of you that the topic of today's meeting reflects one of Canada's highest priorities, and I know it's a high priority for all of you. And I must say it's also for me personally, because of my experiences and because of what I think we've all learned about the reality. Somebody please mute their microphone. I need microphones muted. Paolo, can you identify the culprit? So it's based on a moral belief, but it's also based on an evidence-based conclusion, and that is that where women are included in peace processes, peace is more enduring. Where women are included in the economy, economic growth is greater. Where women are included in governance, states are more stable. And where women are included in security, everyone is safer. And where gender equality is upheld, societies are more peaceful. That's not a statement of belief, that's a statement of fact. And I think it's important for us to start from that premise. The Peace Building Commission has played a leading role in advocating for the systematic inclusion of gender in all efforts to build and sustain peace, but as we will discuss today, we can do more. The purpose of this meeting is to take stock of our collective progress in implementing the PBC's gender strategy since its adoption in 2016, and ideas how to strengthen our efforts. To inform these discussions, we do have the advantage of having an excellent report produced by PBSO and UN Women. I'd like to thank our colleagues from PBSO and UN Women, Anita Matur, Shaza Suleiman, and Tatiana Jitaneva, and independent consultant Louise Allen, who worked through the summer to produce what is an excellent report. I hope you've all had a time to read and reflect on it and the recommendations, and I hope that you've come prepared today with some concrete suggestions on how we can take the agenda forward. I might add that our discussions on this issue will also impact on our future discussions about the role of youth in the whole discussion around security and peace building. As you know, we're working as well to see how we can include more young people or younger people in the discussions. But I think that the lessons that we draw from our experience on the issues of gender equality and gender inclusion and participation will also have an impact on how consistently we pursue our work on youth. So these things will go together in terms of trying to develop some consistency in our reporting and our discussions and how we conduct ourselves. So we have several distinguished briefers with us today. I'm delighted to be joined by Rosemary DiCarlo, the UN Undersecretary General for Political and Peace Building Affairs. She'll be followed by Anitya Bhatia, who's the Deputy Executive Director of UN Women. And then we're going to hear from Ambassador Fatima Kyari Mohammed, who is the AU Permanent Observer to the UN and a strong partner for the PBC. And I'm delighted to be joined by two civil society briefers who I know are here because they've said hello. Patience Ikpa, who's the head of program for the West Africa Network for Peace Building. Like everything in the UN, it has a shorthand, WANEP. Nigeria, WANEP is a network of peace-building civil society organizations with presence in all the countries of ECOWAS, as well as Cameroon and Chad, and she's been a frequent partner to the PBC. Welcome, Patience. And Irma Catalina Citalan Coyoy, a Quiche indigenous leader from Quetzaltenango, Guatemala, a lifelong advocate for indigenous women's rights. Ms. Citalan is a member of NALEB, an Indigenous Peoples Network, working to increase political participation, social accountability in support of efforts to fight corruption. So I'm going to give the floor to the speakers, and I will introduce you briefly by name and ask you to speak. And I think the briefer the briefers can be, while being succinct and complete, the more time there will be for discussion. That's as heavy-handed as I will be. So Rosemary, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. It's a pleasure and honor to be with you on the 20th anniversary of the landmark resolution on women, peace, and security, Security Council Resolution 1325. Since its adoption, we've made significant progress in understanding and addressing the challenges women face in achieving full and equal participation in conflict prevention, conflict resolution, peace building, and sustaining peace. We know that societies give women the space to participate fully in political and socioeconomic life are among the most resilient and most peaceful. And we have mounting evidence that peacemaking and peace building are more successful when women are involved. But there is still much room for improvement. Women's contributions to peace and security are still often outside the mainstream of formal efforts, and too frequently undervalued. I appreciate that the Peace Building Commission gives space to women making such contributions in challenging contexts. I look forward today to hearing directly from civil society briefers who have joined us from Nigeria and Guatemala, as well as representatives from UN Women and the African Union. Mr. Chair, let me begin by noting that the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs has been at the forefront of action across the UN system to strengthen gender-responsive peacemaking and peace building. As a policy, we include women in peace negotiations led by the United Nations. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, we've taken steps to ensure that women's voices are included and amplified in virtual conflict resolution and peace building activities. For example, the Special Envoy for Syria and the Special Representative for Colombia are using digital platforms to consult regularly with women's groups, advisory boards, and mediators networks. In Yemen, the Special Envoy conducted large-scale virtual consultations with over 500 Yemenis, including many Yemeni women's networks. The restrictions on travel and in-person meetings have led us to realize the enormous potential to increase the transparency and inclusion of our peacemaking efforts through new technologies. We've been able to include more women and youth in our dialogues than ever before, thanks to digital tools. Last year, I issued a new Women, Peace, and Security policy to ensure that we integrate women's meaningful participation and gender-sensitive analysis in all our peace efforts. To this end, we are now training more women mediators and supporting women's advisory groups. With UN Women, the Peacebuilding Support Office is updating the Secretary General's 7-point action plan to further strengthen the framework guiding the UN system's work on gender-responsive peacebuilding. The updated action plan includes improving the monitoring and accountability framework of UN gender-responsive peacebuilding interventions. And again, in this regard, I'd like to commend the Peacebuilding Commission for its efforts to reduce the gap between the aspirations and the implementation of the Women, Peace, and Security agenda, including through the adoption of a gender strategy in 2016. And I'd like to convey appreciation to Ireland for its support of this year's review of the strategy. The report on the review of the strategy takes stock of the progress in ensuring a more systematic integration of gender perspectives across the work of the Peacebuilding Commission. It shows the expansion of gender considerations, particularly over the last 2 years. And the report recommends strengthened gender references in the Commission's advice to the Security Council and the inclusion of business leaders, ex-combatants, and survivors of conflict-related sexual violence among the women peace builders who engaged with the Commission. Colleagues, we must recognize that COVID-19 is deepening and magnifying the challenges women face in their societies. Indeed, it has only highlighted how fragile the progress we have made really is. The pandemic has exacerbated existing gender inequalities in conflict-affected countries. And because of its socioeconomic impact, women and girls are at risk of further marginalization from education and economic and political life. Women peace builders increasingly find themselves on the front lines of efforts to protect and support women and girls, as well as other vulnerable segments of society. Since the outset of the pandemic, the PBC has served as a platform to hear accounts of these efforts, including the role of women in facilitating access to healthcare, humanitarian aid, psychosocial support, and social services, as well as initiatives to address the pandemic's devastating economic fallout by teaching women skills to make goods or provide services needed by their communities during this time. But while women are mobilizing at local levels in response to the crisis, they continue to be largely marginalized from COVID-19 response planning and decision-making processes. This is particularly true in conflict settings. In response to the pandemic, the Peacebuilding Fund made rapid adjustments to many of its gender programs. In Colombia, PBF funding has strengthened protection for women health care workers and human rights defenders who are now more vulnerable to sexual and domestic violence. In Guatemala, Public Prosecutor's Office has, with PBF's support, conducted awareness raising and protection activities for women at higher risk of domestic violence in the context of lockdown measures. I want to stress that the implementation of the Women, Peace, and Security agenda is only possible with dedicated and predictable capacity and financing. The Secretary General's Peacebuilding Fund has allocated 40% of its total investments to gender-responsive peacebuilding every year in recognition of the vital role women can play and should play in building and sustaining peace. The PBF has made more investments in spearheading women and youth engagement than any other pooled fund in the UN system. Furthermore, DPPA has allocated 17% of its extra budgetary funds from its multi-year appeal to projects supporting women. To ensure we can monitor, report, and hold ourselves accountable, we have developed a gender marker to track the mainstreaming of gender issues in all our activities. We need the full support of member states to continue and expand this work, and we look to the PBC as an important ally and advocate. Let me end by stressing that we all have a role to play to fulfill the Women, Peace, and Security agenda. Member states, the UN system, and women's organizations at the regional, national, local levels. And we all continue to look to the Peacebuilding Commission and its unique convening and advisory role in furthering this collective endeavor. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. It's been good to hear your affirmations of the steps that are being taken. Very encouraging, and also the size of the challenges that we still face in terms of marginalization. That we're all aware of that. We need to be reminded of it. Anita, over to you from UN Women.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, USG DiCarlo, for laying out the progress that's been made to date. I'm really pleased to provide remarks at this meeting of the Peacebuilding Commission on behalf of UN Women. because this is an issue that I personally am very passionate about. And I'm also very pleased that UN Women is able to partner with PBC and with the Office of ASG Fernandez Terranco to do the work that USG DeCarlo talked about. You know, we look forward to the Peace Building Commission meetings and that take place every March and October. And it's because over the last few years, we have really seen a significant shift in the mindset and the support to this agenda, including through the Commission's gender strategy. And so I do want to start by just recognizing, Chair, our longstanding partnership with the Peace Building Support Office and the absolutely outstanding support of the SG's Peace Building Fund to further gender equality. 1 year ago, I was at this commission meeting and I highlighted some of the challenges that women peace builders are facing on the ground. I wish I could be in the position of saying things are much, much better today. But in fact, as we have just heard, although there have been improvements on a number of fronts, what the pandemic has done is really created a different situation on the ground. We've heard a lot about the disproportionate impact of the pandemic on women, but I want to say three things that I think provide a useful framing for our discussion. The pandemic hit women in three areas that really matter: income, health, and security. Income, because women, the pandemic hit sectors that are deeply feminized, tourism, retail, other sectors like that. But also because the large part of the informal economy is made up of women. So a huge economic impact on women. Second, the pandemic hit women's health. Because during the pandemic, so many resources have been diverted towards, rightly so, towards fighting the vaccine and fighting the virus and developing the vaccine, access to women's health services have all but disappeared on key issues like gynecological and reproductive services. And these are things, Chair, that are going to have very long-term impacts. The economic impacts may be reversible in the short term, but the health impacts are going to be long-term and consequential. And the third is security. We've heard a great deal about the exponential rise in violence against women, and this matters for women peace builders as well. And I mention income, health, and security because income, health, and security impact women peace builders, it impacts those women who quickly became first responders, and it impacts the ability to do more on peace and security. So that's the context. The second thing I want to say is that yesterday, all of us were witnessing a large number of countries, just like a fantastic turnout with statements of support for the Beijing platform. And yet there are fundamental things in the Beijing platform that have not yet been done. And these are sacred cows. But in the spirit of discussion, I want to put some of these sacred cows out there and ask, what is the appetite for actually making progress on these key fundamental issues? So first, I want to say that because governments today are so busy worrying about, rightly so, how to spend and manage the fiscal stimulus packages, we have to ask ourselves, do the fiscal stimulus packages bring enough of a focus on women? And I would say the answer, sadly, is no. We have looked at the Global Gender Response Tracker that we just launched with UNDP, and in that Global Gender Response Tracker, we see that only 1/5 of the 206 countries and territories analyzed have gender sensitive measures in place to respond to the pandemic. So if stimulus packages do not target women specifically, it will be very difficult to drive resources to the issue of women peace builders and women in conflict situations. The second issue that was discussed at Beijing and still remains out there is what is the right distribution and the right amount of funding that should go towards defense spending versus social protection and other systems that can be beneficial for women peace builders. And that's a question that was raised in Beijing and that still remains out there as a topic for discussion and as an issue for us to consider as we think about how do you drive more resources to the agenda of women, peace building, and conflict resolution. And then finally, I want to say that I think there is a tremendous need for global cooperation in this agenda. We have been working at the UN, as we've heard, through all these different mechanisms. How can we crowd in other actors and really make this an issue of global cooperation, where we bring the IFIs to the table and where we leverage the very large resources that the international financial institutions are putting into fragile and conflict-affected states to really make this a policy priority and drive home the need for women to have a seat at the table in discussions. When I look at how many countries have national action plans, it's about 85, and 21 of these are in the World Bank Group's list of fragile and conflict-affected states. Now, the World Bank Group's policy dialogue and lending does not, in my view, yet sufficiently pay attention to the issue of women peace builders, of women having a seat at the table in decision making. So we need to influence those institutions as well in order to get results that are truly impactful and really profoundly different from what we have today. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not think we can do business as usual after the pandemic. The pandemic has already shown that we are in the next normal, and the next normal, sadly, for women at the front lines of conflict is much worse than today's normal. I want to say something about civil society and what we are learning from the women's groups whom we are connected to on the ground. Many of you know that UN Women has an absolutely phenomenal network of women's rights groups on the ground. In fact, we are connected to civil society in every country in the world with the exception of 4 small island states. And talking to these women, it is absolutely clear that the pandemic has been devastating for them. They have lost resources, they have lost funders, the pandemic has disrupted the work of their organization, and these are the women who are at the front line of preventing conflict and building peace. So if we do not direct resources to these marginalized groups, we will not be able to make progress on this agenda. Last word on education. The pandemic is showing already that the historic divide between girls and boys when it comes to access to education is being exacerbated. We run the risk of losing an entire generation of girls if we do not take action. What does this have to do with peace, conflict, and peace building? It is the next generation of peace builders that we are building here. So there is a link, ladies and gentlemen, between the rise in violence and the ability to move on this agenda, between the rise on the impact of civil society and the ability to move on this agenda, the distribution of resources and the focus in stimulus packages and this agenda, the need to bring IFIs to the table, and the need to not lose sight of girls' education as we prepare the next generation. SG, in his comments last year, said, "There is a straight line between violence against women, civil oppression, and conflict. Trillions of dollars are spent every year on peace and security. Whose peace, whose security?" That's the question I think we have to ask ourselves today. Thanks, Chair, and back to you.
Thank you very much, Anita. That was a very powerful presentation and very helpful in our deliberations. Before calling on Fatima, I just want to be the head monitor again and just say that we're still getting some interruptions from people whose mics are on. So please turn them off when you're not speaking. Thank you. So Fatima, over to you, the AU Permanent Observer to the UN. Be good to hear from you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chair. It's an honor for me to join you this morning, particularly on a topic that I hold very dear. And I want to thank you for the invitation, and also thank USG DiCarlo and ASG Bhatia for their insightful briefings on what has been done, but also some of the existing challenges and recommendations to address them. I also look forward to hearing from the representatives from civil society who also bring concrete and practical perspectives to many of our efforts, particularly at the policy level. Chair, this discussion is particularly pertinent at this time as we mark the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration. And this year also marks the 20th anniversary of UNSCR 1325. This landmark resolution brought to the forefront the women, peace, and security agenda, putting it at the center of peace processes. Putting at the center of peace processes the prevention of violence against women, the protection of their rights, and their meaningful participation in decision-making at all levels. The 2020 review of the gender strategy and the peace-building architecture as a whole allows us to address how the international community has been able to translate our commitments to the WPS agenda into impactful actions. This year is also a pivotal year in Africa's peace agenda, as it was declared the year for silencing the guns and creating a conducive environment for Africa's development. 2020 is also meant to be a commemorative year to take stock of achievements in the advancement of the agenda and to define further actions to accelerate the delivery of commitments of member states and other stakeholders. We at the African Union have taken some concrete steps towards embedding this agenda in its core instruments, including in the protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, on the Rights of Women in Africa, the Mobutu Protocol, in the Solemn Declaration on Gender Equality in Africa, and in the AU Peace and Security Architecture as a whole. Regional provisions at the level of the regional economic communities also remain strong within the frameworks, and these guide our efforts to build more peaceful and sustainable societies through genuine inclusion and participation of women at various levels. However, the COVID-19 pandemic, as eloquently elaborated by ASG Bhatia, has brought an unprecedented global health crisis with the potential to reverse decades of progress made to recenter women's meaningful participation and leadership. The pandemic exacerbates poverty, inequalities, and gender-based violence, coined the shadow pandemic by UN Women, while increasing vulnerability by impeding on people's access to employment, food, and other critical resources, with particular effects on women and girls, threatening all efforts led on the peace-building front. Nevertheless, women in peace and security in Africa and across the world have shown resilience in their undertakings and determination to ensure that this invisible enemy does not erode the gains made over the last 2 decades. Chair, considering the current global health crisis, while taking stock of the 20 years of focused attention to accelerating women's participation in peace processes by the African Union, this meeting is opportune as it offers us a chance to not only discuss key findings, but also recommendations on the way forward, taking into consideration the current reality if we want to effectively implement the gender strategy. In this context, permit me to inform you that on the 22nd of September, the African Peace and Security Council adopted a common African position on peace building to feed into and guide the African member states during the formal phase of the 2020 review of the UN peacebuilding architecture. The Common African Position identified 11 peace-building priorities, with the Women, Peace and Security agenda being at the heart of the priorities. The AU is convinced that this Common African Position and the 2020 review provide a unique opportunity to foster and enhance the WPS agenda and to reinforce synergies between the AU and the UN in peace building. Sustaining peace places a particular emphasis on the importance of building strong partnerships, including with regional actors, neighboring countries, and women's-led civil society organizations. Sustaining peace also means strengthening national ownership that ensures the development needs of all segments of the population are met. The AU and its member states stand ready to continue partnering with the UN Peacebuilding Commission on this vital agenda. Mr. Chair, permit me to conclude by stating the following. The normative commitment of the Women, Peace and Security agenda in peace work is apparent and should be able to ensure that our approach to sustaining peace is based on a continuous gender analysis that guarantees the inclusion of women and recognizes and builds on the role women play in building the societal structures needed to maintain peace. The current global pandemic provides a window of opportunity that we must seize to build more equal and inclusive societies with accelerated efforts towards human security, resilience, and gender equality. Women's meaningful participation is critical now more than ever if we are to build a lasting and sustaining peace. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Mohammed. It's much appreciated. We look forward very much to continuing our close collaboration with the AU. And I know we're going to be having a meeting shortly to discuss that, but I really appreciate your intervention today. Thank you so much for that. We're going to hear now from the two civil society briefers, Patience Ikpe and Irma Sitalan. We look forward to hearing each of you in turn. Patience, we hand it over to you.
Okay. Good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. My name is Patience Ikpe. I am currently the head of programs for the West Africa Network for Peacebuilding, WANEP Nigeria, and I'm delighted to be one of the briefers in today's meeting. The West Africa Network of Peacebuilding, WANEP, was established to provide organized platform for collaborative peacebuilding in Nigeria by local non-governmental organizations working in the area of conflict, peace, and security. Its operational framework is designed along the vision of a regional operating network in 15 countries in West Africa with head office in Accra, Ghana. Since 2000, WANEP Nigeria has been implementing a gender-based peacebuilding intervention in communities through the Women in Peacebuilding Network program, which is hinged on promoting the implementation of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. Over the years, the Women in Peacebuilding program has been improved to provide a credible platform for women to address social injustice, as well as play critical roles in balanced inclusion in policy changes at all levels in society. With supports of key partners such as Oxfam, UN Women Nigeria, Urgent Action Fund Africa, the Norwegian Agency of Development Cooperation, NORAD, Global Affairs Canada, the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders, and the Federal Ministry of Women Affairs and Social Development, Nigeria. WANEP has been implementing projects aimed at promoting participation of women in peacebuilding and peace processes in Nigeria. I am honored today to present some results of the Women in Peacebuilding program at community level. WIPNET has served as a platform for civil society organizations to advocate for regional and national government commitments to provide security and protect women's rights within the status of existing domestic and international laws. We run training programs on conflict management, on leadership, peace building, covering over 1,500 women organizations and groups in the 6 geopolitical zones of Nigeria. As we have been working also with CSOs, local partners, international partners, such as the Global Network of Women Peacebuilders and the Norwegian Agency of Development Cooperation to localize United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 in the country. Presently in Nigeria, we have 13 state action plans and over 5 local action plans on Resolution 1325. In the Northeast and the North Central zones of Nigeria, with the recurrent issues of violent extremism and rural banditry and the farmer herders clashes, we have been able to carry out innovative methods of building relationship with gatekeepers, particularly engaging with various stakeholders such as policymakers, security institutions, traditional and religious leaders in dialogues within communities to build synergy for women's participation in issues of peace and security. Women group leaders have been trained in early warning and linked with these gatekeepers as a conflict prevention mechanism, as well as setting up gender-sensitive peace architectures in states, working closely with UN Women Nigeria. WANEP Nigeria is presently participating in the Women Dialogue and Mediation Coordination Platform, a platform initiated by UN Women Nigeria to facilitate collaboration amongst governments, intergovernment, international, non-governmental organizations, and also development partners in the context of the farmer-herders conflicts. This initiative is in line with the ongoing PBF support integrated approach to build peace in Nigeria's farmer-herders crisis. Presently, the platform joint initiatives are getting attention, and further support would strengthen the participation of women in formal and informal dialogue and mediation efforts in Nigeria. Our COVID-19 intervention. As we are aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has posed new layers of fragility and vulnerability, especially for women who are the front line and are facing double jeopardy, particularly during the lockdown imposed by the government as they were locked in with their abusers. During this period, WANEP created online survey platforms to document incidences of sexual and gender-based violence for referral and intervention, and supported a radio program titled COVID-19 Pandemic and SGBV in Nigeria. WANEP Nigeria is presently implementing training programs for community women on COVID-19 pandemic, raising awareness on peace building and sexual and gender-based violence, on what women should do to protect themselves, as well as young girls, how and where they should report incidences of violence, and where to seek redress. To better support our work, we request the following. 1, targeted funding for local women peace building, documentation, recognition, and visibility of women peace building efforts, particularly at the local level. 2, connect the women peace and security agenda with other key issues such as access to land, economic empowerment, and child rights issues. 3, legislation has to be enacted and amended to improve the situation of women in Nigeria, particularly internally displaced women, in accordance with international instruments and standards. There's need to strengthen legislative frameworks to ensure the implementation of the UNSCR 2025, particularly calling for dedicated budgets to ensure implementation at state and local government levels. We also request a comprehensive national legislation to stop proliferation of small arms and light weapons, because these weapons exhibit conflict and heighten the vulnerability of women to further violent abuses, such as sexual-based violence. We are requesting support for peace builders with appropriate technologies they need, including access to platforms, access to phones, internet, radio, and online platforms, and other communication tools, particularly during this COVID-19 era. This should include supporting the development of innovative ways of reaching local communities. Lastly, we are calling for the inclusion of socio-economical and psychological perspective in humanitarian responses in the post-COVID-19 era. This will be necessary to enable women heal from hurts of sexual violence and promote their effective participation in peace-building processes. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Patience. That was a wonderful perspective from the ground up that we really need. And I think you taught us so much in a very short time. And I hope you feel connected with us as we feel connected with you. It's been very, very valuable to get your views. Irma, can we hear from you in Guatemala?
Thank you, Chair. Guatemalan women, particularly indigenous women, have made great groundbreaking contribution to the establishment and consolidation of inclusive and sustainable peace. In 1996, the peace accords were the first one in the region to contain commitment on women's rights. an achievement that informed the development and adoption of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. In the decades since, women and women organizations have remained at the forefront of key development in the construction of peace and gender equity. For example, by generating decisive contribution to women's access to justice. They have also been actively engaged as right defenders in claiming broader human rights protections and offering accompaniment to women victims of survival of violence in conflict and post-conflict contexts. The key achievements include the pioneer contribution for women's survival of sexual violence and the other human rights violations during and after the internal armed conflict. The Abuelas of Sepur Zarco, a group of Quechua women peace builders, obtaining a landmark transformative reparation sentence in 2016. The first meeting by a national court that condemned conflict-related sexual violence in the form of sexual and domestic slavery in its own country. After which, they have continued to advocate and monitor the implementation of the 18 reparation measures ruled in the sentence. UN Women and Peace Building Fund have actively supported the grandmother's efforts, including by involving women peace builders as partners in their initiatives in equal conditions, and which the aim of strengthening their voice as relevant political actors. Despite notable progress, women continue to face different forms of violence, including through intimidation, threats, smear campaigns, and misuse of criminal law and other legal procedures, among others. Strengthening women's persistently low participation in political, economic, social, and cultural life, particularly at the decision-making levels, is one of the key challenges to prevent and mitigate the drivers of conflict in the country. Guatemala has one promising developments that, properly supported, could offer the basis for a systematic transformation to advance gender justice and women-led efforts to sustain peace. Women leaders have been engaged in dialogue with key stakeholders at the national and international levels. For example, through the establishment of the Platform of Indigenous Women's Political Dialogue in Guatemala, of which I am a member. This platform is a network that brings together Indigenous women with proven records of champion on gender equality and with diverse type of expertise. The platform directly advises the government on how best to incorporate women's needs in their strategic planning, budgeting, and policies. There is also a growing intergenerational multi-ethnic partnership between women peace builders that is emerging. As the United Nations commemorative the 20th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325, there is an opportunity to build momentum of these efforts, increasing support and investment on Guatemala women's participation as key catalyzer for the sustaining of peace in Guatemala and beyond. To do this, particularly in the light of disproportionate impacts of COVID-19 on women and indigenous people, it is crucial to ensure they are included in decision-making processes and that resources are available to respond to the issues that affect them. This should include A, ensuring the inclusion of indigenous people and indigenous women in the consultation mechanisms for all national processes which affect them, ensuring they have their own seats and voices in dialogues and exchanges with the state, the United Nations system, and the international community, and with other relevant stakeholders. B, promote the collection of disaggregated statistical data based on indigenous identity or ethnicity on consensus and household surveys for the development of evidence-based policies designed to address their needs. C, encourage the United Nations system to include indigenous people and indigenous women as the country teams and coordinate their programs directly with women organizations without intermediaries. In this regards, indigenous women demand to be included as partners, as not as a beneficiary, a practice where UN women have made an enormous difference in Guatemala. D, set financial targets to meet the needs of indigenous women and young to create conditions to build back better and to foster sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Irma, for that presentation. A very good reminder of the reality in Guatemala, but also in many, many parts of the Americas and elsewhere. It's a very, very strong presentation. Thank you so much. Colleagues, I have good news and bad news for you. The good news is that we have many presenters who want to respond from different countries. But that's also the bad news, is that because there are so many, I shall have to ask you to limit your comments to just a few short minutes. So I have, just to give you a heads up, in terms of the next 2 or 3, I have Japan, Bangladesh, and Ireland on my list, and then we'll follow on from there. So my colleague, Ambassador Ishikane, if you go ahead, please. Kimihiro.
Well, thank you, Bob, and thank you very much for the briefers for very much insightful statements. Well, of course, peace building should always emphasize local ownership and the people-centered, comprehensive, context-specific, and prevention-oriented approach is the foundation for effective peace building. Naturally, agenda, perspective is essential. And women's full, equal, and meaningful participation in peace building is indispensable for sustaining peace. And this was very much, I think, highlighted by the pandemic, because women are usually, as people has put forward, most vulnerable situation, but also at the same time, they are at the forefront in protecting their children and their family and so forth. And PBC has, I think, championed gender, responsive peace building, actively engaging with local women peace builders and learning from them while providing advice to Security Council. And this has to continue. And we can and should use the PBC's convening power and bridging role even more. The PBC should strengthen, consultations with diverse group of women peace builders from different regions and background. I'm very much, pleased to hear the voice from Fatima and Ms. Patience and Ms. Emer. So I'd like to ask them, what are the difficulties they are, really facing, and if there are any requests they have vis-a-vis Peace Building Commission. Well, connecting the PBC with these, on the field with remote communication is very effective. The outcome of such bottom-up, approach could add even more value to the PBC's advice to the Security Council. But this should be, followed up. So regular monitoring and review of PBC agenda strategy will be possible by institutionalizing thematic meetings on gender. Once the thematic platforms are set up and institutionalized, we will be able to capitalize on PBC's convening powers to bring together various stakeholders. So we look to strengthen the PBC's role in integrating gender responsive perspective into the whole UN peace building architecture and beyond. I thank you, Bob.
That's good, Kimihiro. Thank you very much. Good question. We'll come to that at the end. And now from Bangladesh, Rabab.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank you for organizing this timely event on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325. It's also very good to see you in the chair. Bangladesh and Canada work very closely on WPS and PBC issues, and I look forward to further strengthening our partnership on this issue. I also thank the briefers for their insightful remarks. Mr. Chair, we believe that peace building and WPS are inextricably linked. our women have had always invaluable contribution to our nation building efforts. And we played a pioneering role in women's peacekeeping. Women peacekeepers form an integral part of our peacekeeping contingents. Our national experience inspired us to promote the adoption of Resolution 1325 in 2000 when we were serving in the Security Council as a non-permanent member. And last year, we launched the National Action Plan on WPS with multi-stakeholder participation, including from the civil society. Mr. Chair, we welcome the adoption of the PBC's gender strategy, and with Canada, we served as a focal point for its implementation. The strategy has resulted in encouraging outcomes and now integrated in PBC's work. PBF's increased investment in gender equality project has also contributed further to the strategy's integration. Gender references have been included in all documents reviewed in 2020, and we commend PBC for its efforts to ensure that. We cannot, however, be complacent. There remain formidable challenges, particularly in the implementation of the WPS agenda across the pillars. PBC can play a critical role in filling those gaps. The pandemic also presents challenges, both operational and on financing. Women peacekeepers and peace builders have been playing a critically important role now, but at the same time, the pandemic also creates new challenges. It will be important to ensure contingency planning and preparedness for tackling health and other such emergency situations. Going forward, let me make a few brief proposals. First, PBC can support exchange of good practices through multi-stakeholder partnerships and networking among women's organizations, including from civil society, media, and the private sector. We successfully did that in developing our national action plan, and that ensures also an ownership. Second, in the post-conflict and humanitarian settings, PBC has to enhance its advocacy, bridging, and convening roles to ensure a responsive approach to the gender aspects of transitions by sensitizing all sectors of the society. Third, accountability and justice for conflict-related sexual violence has to be ensured. In cases where the state concerned is unwilling or unable to ensure justice, the international community will need to step forward and take responsibility. Fourth, quality up-to-date gender data is critical for advancing WPS agenda. That would help map the gains and gaps in reaching women and girls and design policy interventions accordingly. PBC needs to support the national governments in this regard. Fifth, UN agencies and other international partners would need to support national governments in education, training, and national capacity building through meaningful partnerships. Accordingly, the capacity of the UN city, especially UN women, needs to be enhanced. WPS needs to be internalized in their programs. Sixth, women's participation in peacekeeping need to be increased, and gender considerations should be made an integral part of missions drawdown and transition. Finally, Mr. Chair, increased, sustained, and coordinated mobilization of finances, including through earmarking, are critical for giving real effect to the women, peace, and security agenda in its various dimensions. We hope that the 20th anniversary of the WPS agenda would help build fresh momentum to ensure full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in peace building. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much. That's terrific. Very, very, very good presentation. Geraldine, you're next from Ireland.
Thanks very much indeed, Bob. Good to see you in the chair, and great to be part of this debate. Look, a couple of the briefers this morning, who are excellent, by the way, have made the point. This is a critical moment, I would say. On the one hand, it's a poetic moment for us, 2020, a landmark year of many of the anniversaries, but that's not what we want. We've had enough rhetoric already, frankly. So what we really are involved in this morning, and I'm glad to hear our briefing has gone that way, is to be rather hard-nosed about what we look at now in terms of the possibilities that this, as I would see a threshold in a way, offers us, and to try and take advantage of some of the new possibilities. I think that the review of the peace-building architecture is a good way to anchor the gender perspective in our work, but unless we actually get down to the practical implementation, we're frankly just never going to make a difference. So the objective, I think, today, shared one, should be that we start to make some inroads into that gap that we know is there between the rhetoric that we all sit and admire, and the reality on WPS. We're certainly of the view that the PBC's gender strategy is a good thing. It's welcome. It's overdue. In fact, we were one of the ones that called for the review a year ago, and we were delighted to support Oscar and the PBSO in bringing the project to fruition. Before I get into some of the detail, just to say that stepping back from it, looking at the actual report, there are a couple of key recommendations that I see as sort of traveling through our overview of this project. The first is that we absolutely have to insist every time on women's leadership and representation at the center of the work we're doing here in the PBC. We talk about it, we actually have to live it in the PBC. That means for us a systematic engagement of women leaders from different backgrounds, including grassroots women, being at the table with us, being brought in by member states. Happily, I was delighted to see Fatma with us this morning from regional bodies and organisations that actually bring women to the table. We often have superb ministerial participation in the PBC. Let's make sure we have women's voices in that leadership as well in the PBC. And one more time, I know I've said this before, Oscar hears me whenever we speak, say this, we really need to have at our disposal gender disaggregated data and improve gender analysis, because we know that we have to be more impactful, but unless we have that intersectional approach that actually addresses the difference and the overlapping factors that get in the way, that discriminate, that exclude women, we simply can't get to a proper analytical base with evidence and hardcore research. Of course, what matters to us now, just a couple of remarks about what we're doing here in the PBC, is that we look really to an implementation and monitoring framework so that we can then track how we're doing. And for us, that also includes the accountability factor. For me, accountability is really essential. Unless we step up on accountability, this strategy is going to end up as yet another dusty report that we will refer to in a historic way, and it'll be a lost opportunity. We really do want to see meaningful participation, and that means actual action and making ourselves accountable. So I think we have to be accountable against a set of clearly defined actions. And we in Ireland have learned this ourselves in between the national action plans that we had. We're now on our third one, but by the time we came to our third one, we realized that we needed a more robust monitoring framework to actually track our own government on the delivery and on the respect for international commitments. So today's meeting, I think, is a great start. But I'm calling now, as I'm on the screen with you, Bob, but for the future chair also, that we have an annual PBC session at ambassadorial level that will examine the progress and the implementation of the gender strategy, hold ourselves to account. I see that as completely separate from our annual meeting on WPS, because I know that we have a much broader agenda at that annual meeting. I think we need to have a dedicated discussion about our gender strategy separate from our usual WPS discussion. I wanted, before finishing, Chairman, just to say a couple of words about the specific recommendations to the Security Council ahead of the open debate on WPS. We're an incoming member of the Council, and certainly I can say that you can hold us to account in following through on these concrete proposals. I have three ideas that I wanted to share with you. The first, we know that the WPS emerges from a strong normative framework, but we also know that the dynamics in the Council show how hard-won gains in recent years are now at risk, and how, frankly, the environment in the Security Council is a very tricky one, if I can put it in a neutral way. We're calling on the Security Council, and as a member we will do this, to focus on the implementation of existing resolutions and to actually mainstream, I think this is really important, the WPS agenda needs to be right across and applied in a proactive way across the Security Council agenda. For me, that means every mandate renewal, every geographic, every thematic discussion, local consultation, analysis, we will come back again and again to the role of women in peace building and peacemaking. Second concrete recommendation is that, as the report itself here highlights, that the PBC discussions have been enriched where we've had them with women peace builders at the table. We know in Ireland that our own experiences that peace processes are sustained really by having women in there at the start and at the beginning, the design, the architecture of the processes. So now at the Security Council, we will urge, and we would like the PBC to urge, that the Council avail of its full convening powers across every fora and in all the formats that the Council meets to actually bring women peace builders to the table, including those grassroots activists I mentioned earlier this morning. The third point I wanted to make on the Security Council is that we really need to make sure that there's an allocation of resources that converts this rhetoric to reality. The Secretary General has talked about a hidden war on women, but he's also importantly talked about using the scale of resources that are used in classical warfare, however crazy we think this sounds, to actually invest in the advancement of women in peace and security. I think we need to listen to him. We have to finance the WPS agenda and invest in women peace builders, including in our very precious and wonderful peace building fund, so that we can align our priorities on WPS with our ambition. So just to say, finally, we know, Mr. Chairman, you've heard several speakers this morning speak about the double whammy now with COVID that women face, not just being the ones who carry in many instances the burden, but also we're very conscious that the funding of programs that support women, that address the impact on girls and women, are now going to suffer in the inevitable economic knock-on effect. So just a reminder to ourselves, we are at a threshold in 2020. We don't want to miss this opportunity, and certainly what we don't want to see is that we have a lost generation, not just of young women and girls in education, but also of women as peace builders. So I went on a little longer than I thought I would, Mr. Chair. I apologise, but I'm grateful to have had the chance to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Geraldine. I think what you've said is very important, and particularly with respect to your pointing out and reminding us how much progress we've made in mainstreaming, but these are gains that are constantly being challenged in the Security Council and in the United Nations and around the world. So we need to understand that the battle is joined. I can assure you that as the chair in my ebbing moments as chair, I will be continuing to impress this on whoever will listen. And that includes issues around resources and around our insistence that in the Fifth Committee and elsewhere, that this is the lie that this is somehow a frill and not an integral part of our charter obligations needs to continue to be exposed. And I shall be doing that with great gusto, I can assure you. I've posted the list of speakers. Olaf is next. We have a lot of speakers, so govern yourselves accordingly in terms of length of interventions. Olaf.
Thanks a lot, Bob, for putting this on the agenda and for your own personal commitment to the agenda. And thank you for lining up 5-star briefers to start this discussion off, and kudos to all of them. I just want to say that coming in right after Geraldine, speaking for Ireland, I think she also spoke with a passion and commitment to this agenda that very much reflects where the European Union stands. Bob, yesterday we had the Beijing 25 summit, and I think it was, as Anita referred to, a constant and consistent reference to the fact that, to build peaceful societies around the world, there has to be a better representation and engagement by the half of the population that is too often neglected or set aside. So the UN Peacebuilding Commission's gender strategy is in itself a very important tool in making the efforts to build peaceful societies around the world more effective. Yet, the Secretary General's latest reports on women, peace and security delivers a deeply worrying outlook that points that we are far from where we should be, and how the status of societal involvement of women, and in particular in conflict situations, is not where it should be. Although women in political life has gone up, I note that in conflict affected countries, only 19% of parliamentarians are women. The number of peace agreements that have provisions for gender equality have increased, but still 78% of such agreements make no specific arrangements to ensure equal inclusion of women in the rebuilding of the country. In the major peace process since 1992, 6% of the signatories are women. In other words, 94% of the signatories to agreements that were negotiated and agreed fundament for reestablishment and rebuilding of entire societies were men. And as all women around the world knows, and I hope an increasing number of men are starting to realize, that is neither fair nor particularly smart. In fact, it's pretty absurd. And that's why the gender strategy for the UN Peacebuilding Commission remains, I would say, indispensable. We very much salute the review of the implementation. And on the WPS, there is significant implementation gap, as speakers before me have stressed. And there is a gap between what is being said and what is being done. In the 20 years that have passed since the adoption of 1325, academic studies have documented that participation of women is essential at all levels and in all areas. In particular, women peace builders, grassroots women groups and organizations, and women's mediation networks. And based on that knowledge, the policies and strategies and frameworks have been developed, but the practical implementation is lacking. Bob, I had your job as chairing the Peacebuilding Commission in 2015 when we started discussing the fact that there was no gender strategy. And I'm glad that it was then adopted. But I also want to say that for us, the European Union, we very much support that there is a regular monitoring and review of how we implement that strategy. Including, you know, a monitoring and an evaluation framework. So we very much recommend that we take a comprehensive approach to this. Women are experts of their own experience. Their messages and contribution to understanding the causes of instability and conflict are essential to finding ways forward. And to hear those messages consistently, we need more women are involved in peace building. That has to be starting in our own Peacebuilding Commission work here in New York. And there needs to be, and I want to say that we appreciate how the Peacebuilding Fund has developed a very strong gender lens applied in their various interventions. So there are positive things happening. For the EU, and we do a lot of similar work in the field together with the UN, we have our own action plan on women, peace and security, which is based on 1325. And we are trying to work to ensure that the rights, agency and protection of women and girls, as well as meaningful and equitable role in decision-making for women during all stages of conflict prevention are covered. Finally, I just want to say that I appreciate the very concrete proposals made by our briefers today that are in the review, and Geraldine stressed many of them. And I just want to say that from the European Union, we're ready to work to have them implemented more forcefully. And Bob, count on us to support your efforts in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Olaf. I have, just to be clear, I have Ronaldo, I have Lang Yabu from Gambia, I have Omar from Morocco, and I have Guillermo from Colombia. So those are the next speakers. So Ronaldo, Brazil.
Thank you very much, Bob, and thank you for convening this meeting, and I thank you and the team for assembling such a qualified panel of briefers to assist us today. I thank each and every one of them for their reflections, which I think have set the stage for a very constructive debate. I think one common thread that comes through all of the briefers' statements, and with which we agree, is that there is a lot of work yet to be done. Even so, we feel that the 20th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325 is something that merits celebration. Since the launching of the WPS agenda, a growing number of women have been able to take part in peace processes in every region of the world. The data suggests, and I think you mentioned this, Bob, at the beginning, that this engagement alone has greatly contributed to render peace deals more sustainable and better able to generate socioeconomic dividends that benefit all sectors of society. Now, in parallel to celebrating Resolution 1325, we're also celebrating this year the 75th anniversary of the UN itself. And we would like at this occasion to pay tribute to the 4 women who fought to include the equality between men and women in that which has been perhaps the most lasting peace effort of our times, which is the UN Charter itself. We in Brazil take great pride in the role played by our delegation in San Francisco, and in particular by Dr. Berta Luz in this momentous endeavor. Moving forward, let me briefly offer 3 recommendations on how the PBC can continue to implement the WPS agenda. And these recommendations, I think, dovetail well with what has been said by many of my colleagues who have preceded me. Firstly, we feel that the PBC should continue to adopt an open door policy to women peace builders and offer its platform so that women engaged in peace processes throughout the entire continuum can share their views and policy recommendations. For instance, in June 2019, the PBC was briefed by Brazilian naval officer Captain Márcia Braga, who was bestowed with the UN's Military Gender Advocate Award in 2019 for her work in the United Nations multidimensional integrated stabilization mission in the Central African Republic. We believe this was a good practice worth replicating. In every UN presence in the field, there is dedicated staff willing to share innovative solutions for improving women's roles in peace efforts. Secondly, PBSO should contribute to the effort of monitoring and reporting on the implementation of the WPS agenda. It is essential that the whole UN membership can take stock of messages coming from women peace builders in the field. The first report on the implementation of the gender strategy of the PBC, shared prior to this meeting, is a welcome development on this front. We encourage PBCO, as well as the whole Department of Peace Building and Political Affairs, to share WPS assessments and policy recommendations with PBC members on a regular basis, with a particular focus on good practices coming from the field. Third and finally, the PBC must continue to reinforce its consultative role with regards to the WPS agenda. Building on Commander Braga's briefing last year, the PBC has advised the Security Council to encourage MINUSCA's exchanges with women leaders in local communities, including as a means to better understand violations, to enhance the mission's early warning capacities, and to provide a more tailored approach to the protection of civilians. Brazil encourages the PBC to offer its specialized advice on WPS whenever the Security Council is scheduled to negotiate the mandate of a peacekeeping operation or a special political mission. Let me just finally reiterate Brazil's commitment to the empowerment of women in all areas. I'm confident that encouraging women to fully engage in peace efforts constitutes a fundamental contribution to the effectiveness of our efforts to sustain peace. Thank you very much, Bob.
Thank you, Ronaldo. We posted a new list, which is pretty well, I would hope, complete. But next is Gambia, Lanyabu.
Thank you, Chair. I join my colleagues to thank all the briefers for an excellent briefing. Chair, since this is my first time to intervene in a meeting convened by you as chair of this very important body, the PBC, allow me to welcome you to New York once again. My delegation has worked closely with your predecessor, and we intend to accord the same support and understanding to you and your team as you discharge the duties of care of the Commission. We thank you for convening a meeting of this kind at a time that is relevant to discuss a topic that is not new to PBC, women, peace and security, in the context of peace building and sustaining peace. Also permit me to extend my most profound gratitude to DPA, PBC, UN Women, and the consultant for an excellent report on the review of the implementation of the PBC gender strategy. The Gambia welcomes this report and its much anticipated purpose. From our experience, this strategy goes to the heart of participatory governance that the advocacy of our transitional justice supports, and that is leaving no one behind. Mr. Kea, during the difficult times of our transition, every household was reassured peace and tranquility by women peace builders. Among them were politicians who had specifically joined politics to bring in change for democracy and a better standard of living for every Gambian. This spirit of women leadership encouraged the government of the Gambia to take due note of the stance of women and never ignore their courage and determination, but to recognize their very important contributions to the society as partners in peace, security, and development. In this connection, and in recognition of women as equal partners in peace building and sustaining peace, the government of the Gambia has adopted an all-inclusive approach to its peace building and sustaining peace agenda to double efforts and amplify the role of women in society as peace builders and major contributors to the growth of its economy. In this endeavor, women are carefully and strategically placed to impact policy, rule of law, and judicial decision-making in the cabinet, parliament, and the judiciary, respectively. Mr. Kea, the active and productive role that women contribute to the three arms of state informs the success in participatory and inclusive peace building and sustaining peace efforts in the Gambia. In this regard, the ongoing peace building and sustaining peace efforts in the Gambia concerning the constitutional review, security sector review, national development, and the Popular Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commissions all have women at the top of helm as decision makers. In closing, Mr. Kea, the government of Gambia is encouraged and continue to be encouraged by the unreserved role that women play in an effort to build and sustain peace in the Gambia and beyond. It is therefore true in the Gambian context that where women are placed at the helm of leadership, only peace, security, and development prevails. I also seize this opportunity to reassure this august body of our commitment to the various transitional reform processes highlighted above, and to thank each one of you for your continuous support. We hope and pray that PBC and all partners will continue to accompany us in our difficult journey in the transition. We remain committed to issues of women, peace, and security. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand the floor over to Omar from Morocco.
Thank you very much, dear Bob, our chair for PBC, for convening this timely meeting and for your engagement at the realm of our commission, in particular during this challenging time. The gender perspective is essential to successful peace building in all its components. And in this regard, I'm pleased to recognize all the efforts and results achieved by the PBC, particularly since 2016, and the adoption of its gender strategy. It is also worth mentioning that it was the first strategy of this kind adopted by the UN intergovernmental subsidiary body. My delegation welcomes the review report on the implementation of the PBC gender strategy, including its key recommendations. It is indeed a very useful document, highlighting best practices, but also areas where more efforts are required. It is, for example, duly noted and appreciated that the strengthened gender references in the Commission's advice to the Security Council are considered as one of the good practice. I will continue to advocate for that as the chair of the Central African Republic configuration and make sure that we keep this element as a good practice for the next advice that we started to prepare in provision of the MINUSCA as upcoming mandate renewal this month. Morocco is a strong supporter of gender strategies in general, but in particular when it comes to peace building. Indeed, in my capacity as chair of the Central African Republic Confederation, I had the honor and pleasure to engage substantively with various types of women groups during my numerous visits to the country. I was always impressed by the strength and level of their engagement despite very difficult circumstances. I take this opportunity to congratulate the PBF first for reaching 40% of its engagement in projects that are gender focused or gender sensitive, but also for the success of the various projects launched recently in the CAR. One of these projects allowed to build a small facility in the vicinity of the parliament to host the organization of women parliamentarians. This investment supported greatly the work of the women parliamentarians and gave them space to organize meetings and to host delegations. Also, it is important to highlight the fact that the engagement of the fund, together with MINUSCA and the country team, systematically ensure that the gender perspective is taken into account in all the different projects and programs. From a national perspective, Morocco has been fully engaged in all forums addressing gender issues, be it to fight impunity against sexual violence or to promote participation of women in peacekeeping operations. Morocco has also been very engaged on the religious aspect of this important issue, namely by promoting and supporting the training of religious scholars, including women. Mr. Chairman, I would like also to highlight an important element. The report stresses the need to strengthen gendered resourcing or expertise. I am pleased to inform you that Morocco is pioneer and leader in gender responsive budgeting. Morocco established since 2013 a center of excellence dedicated to gender responsive budgeting, which is considered nowadays as a success story and the model of South-South cooperation. Finally, Morocco would like to express its full support to the key recommendations presented in the review reports, in particular, the need to review periodically the gender strategy in order to facilitate any adjustment, but also the need for an enhanced advocacy across the UN system and with other partners. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Omar. Next is Guillermo, followed by Eric. Guillermo.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, dear Bob. Thank you for convening this meeting. Today's briefing and comments and recommendations of both briefers and from our colleagues reaffirm my conclusion and my conviction that we must keep the gender strategy as a priority and participate very active in the forthcoming contribution to the open debate of the Security Council scheduled for 29 of October. I believe that it's going to be a great opportunity for us to show how committed we are with this gender strategy. Also, I will like just to mention that in resolution 2493 of the Security Council of October of last year, the Council called for the full implementation of the Commission's gender strategy to further promote women's participation in peace building and prevention efforts, and to continue support for the participation of women-led peace building organizations in planning, stabilization, and recovery efforts. That's, by the way, what we are doing in Colombia in a complex time, but with the hope that this is the way to advance in the implementation of our gender strategy. Thank you for all the comments. Thank you, Mr. Chair, that you can count with Colombia in this important issue and in the work that the Peace Building Commission and the Peace Building Fund are doing in consolidating this important matter of our work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Guillermo, and we appreciate your support. It means a lot. Eric from Burkina Faso, followed by Israel Davies from Liberia.
Mr. President, bonjour. This is the first time I have taken the floor since you have been sharing the meeting of the Commission, and I would like, therefore, to congratulate you and to wish you every success in your new functions. I would like to thank the other briefers for their brilliant remarks. Mr. President, my delegation is pleased to take part in this today's meeting, which allow us to exchange on the main conclusion and recommendation contained in the reports prepared by DPPA, PBSO, and UN Women on the implementation of PBC, the PBC strategy on gender equality, and to provide comments for the effective implementation of the strategy. It is satisfying that the report has shown that gender considerations have improved in 2019 and 2020, and that these are led, in some cases, to enriching discussion reached by women leaders. Mr. President, while women in some countries' specific contexts continue to face gender-based discrimination and structural barriers to equal opportunities for participation in decision-making and peace-building process, this report is timely because, in many ways, it allows us to focus on the major challenge related to addressing the gender dimension of conflict prevention and peace building. Following the Bureau's review, the various consultations and the meeting of experts held on the 4th of September 2020, we believe it's essential to emphasize two key elements that could strengthen the systematic implementation of the gender equality strategy. One, the need for regular monitoring and review of the gender equality strategy, including through the development of an action plan on the strategy. Two, the organization of broad, strengthening and more diversified consultation with the various stakeholders in the framework of thematic, country, and region-specific discussion. The adoption of an effective mechanism for monitoring the implementation of the strategy should enable us to achieve regular reporting and greater accountability of each actor. Furthermore, it is important to maintain and strengthen the synergy between the Commission and the Peacebuilding Fund, and to maintain close collaboration between the Commission and the international finance institution, so that all action undertaken take into account the gender dimension of conflict prevention and peace building. The report highlights examples of good practice that have led to major gains, and we encourage their scaling up. Among others, we can highlight improving communication with community leaders, civil society, and communities leaders. Regular field trips by the President of the Country Confederation strengthen opportunities for direct dialogue with local women who have experienced conflict and holding consultative dialogue with women leaders. Mr. President, in Burkina Faso, women are at the forefront of peace-building initiatives, especially in the context of the security crisis and its corollary of massive population displacement. On the ground, the government is continuing its efforts to strengthen women's participation in decision-making process, especially in these election years. This review will enable us, through the recommendation, to strengthen national mechanisms that take into account the gender dimension of conflict prevention and peace building. I thank
you. Thank you so much, Eric. We're now going to have Israel, followed by Nathalie. Israel, are you there? I'll ask one more time. Is Israel Davies there?
Yes, I am here. I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Can you get me?
We can hear you loud and clear, and I can even see you.
Thank you for the opportunity. A lot has been shared and commented on by many great speakers. I would like to make few comments as well. We pride ourselves for the many landmark achievements relating to women, peace, and security, as well as empowerment of women. For example, the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, the 20th anniversary of the Security Council Resolution 1325, and the 5th year since the adoption of the SDGs. Here, I would like to make specific reference to Goal 5. In spite of these, during the just ended high-level meeting of the 4th Conference of Women, the speakers unanimously highlighted the deprivation, violence, discrimination, and suffering women face. And speaking about violence, speakers reiterated WHO report that one in every 3 women face sexual or physical violence. This is indeed horrific. And with the existence of COVID-19, the existing gender inequalities for women and girls have severely worsened. This goes to say that we need to do more, particularly with gender mainstreaming. It's high time that we expand the campaign aimed to conscientize everyone about the significant role women can play in our society when they are protected and empowered. I'm of the conviction that what men can do, women can do as well. And when women are involved in the initiative, it is sustained. For example, Eleanor Roosevelt played a leading role in as a chairperson in the drafting committee of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Since then, this has remained the global roadmap of freedom and equality, protecting the rights of every individual everywhere. In 2019 October, NASA astronaut Jessica Meir and Christiana Koch took part in the first all-women spacewalk, leaving their International Space Station to replace a power controller. Today, it is not a male who has sparked the global movement for climate change, rather Ms. Greta Thunberg, who has reminded humanity that we face an existential crisis. Our success on securing the future we want will be largely hinged on how we confront climate change. Many young women in Liberia who have joined the military or police force today got their inspiration from the all-female contingent of Indian peacekeepers deployed in Liberia. Following years of civil upheaval in Liberia, when the women of Liberia realized that there was no perpetual end in sight, they took matters into their hands. Under the banner of Women for Liberia Mass Action for Peace, they staged a silent, non-violent protest, which proved very critical in compelling key stakeholders to reach a peace deal in Liberia, thus bringing an end to the second Liberia civil crisis in 2003. Whatever the political will, promises, intentions we have to transform conditions of women must translate to concrete and practical actions. We need to support the cause for equal opportunity for women, as well as to bridge the gap that has to do with gender pay. For Liberia, in the midst of challenges, we are committed to doing our part to ensure that women and girls enjoy the same rights and privileges as male counterparts. To this end, the government of Liberia adopted a revised national gender policy launched in 2017. We passed into law the Domestic Violence Bill in 2019, a legal instrument that seeks to abolish all forms of violence meted against women, children, and men. The Peace Building Fund was very supportive in this achievement, I must highlight here. Temporarily, the bush schools where the practice of female genital mutilation is carried out is closed, halting such practice. Except for the legislature, where there are fewer women, in the judiciary, there are 2 women out of 5 justices. From the recent appointments made by President Weah, women constitute 53% at the ranks of minister, deputy ministers, judge, director general, deputy director, etc. It may be very important to also indicate that with the immeasurable assistance from the PBF, we were able to develop in 2017 the gender strategy, security strategy, which has led to the establishment of the following: gender units in all security institutions, as well as in some ministries and agencies. The development of gender policies in 3 security institutions, such as the Liberian Immigration Service, Liberian National Police, and the Bureau of Corrections and Rehabilitation, in order to mainstream gender in the security sector. And 2, the launch of the Spotlight Initiative meant to end violence against women and girls. In concluding, let me reaffirm that we will continue to support the peace-building gender strategy. And as a country, with support from partners, we will remain committed in supporting gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. We anticipate more robust collaboration in the premise to advance and implement strategies that protect women and address gender inequalities. I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Israel, thank you so much. Now we have Nathalie from France and Dominique from Switzerland, followed by USDPR, Sheriff Chalet. So you're on.
Monsieur le Président. Monsieur le Président, I first want to thank you for organizing this meeting. I also want to thank those who participated in the report on the review of the implementation of the PBC gender strategy, especially PBSO, GPPA, and UN Women. And I would like, of course, to thank warmly all the excellent briefers that we heard today. Since the adoption of the 2016 gender strategy, important progress has been made to address more systematically gender issues in our work here at the Peacebuilding Commission. We have invited a more diverse set of women peace builders. We have adopted a more systematic gender approach in our discussions and in our recommendations. And the Peacebuilding Fund has also support women engagement in prevention and in peacebuilding projects. But of course, as has already been said, much more can be done and must be done. There's no doubt that we are still far from the goal set by the Security Council Resolution 1325 and by the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Women continue to face discrimination. Opportunities are not equal for men and women when it comes to participation in decision-making and peace-building process. And as Anita Bhatia so powerfully underlined, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated all those challenges, and it creates strong risk in the short term and in the long term to move us backward. So concretely speaking, and I would like to really support what the ambassador from Ireland, my colleague from Ireland, underlined, the importance of concrete steps now. As regard with France, we have dedicated 232.3 million euros to projects contributing to the implementation of the WPS agenda. We provided financial support to the International Fund for Survivors of Conflict-Related Sexual Violence, created by the Nobel Prize recipients, Dr. Denis Mukwege and Nadia Murad. And I wanted to also flag in 2021, the Generation Equality Forum that together with UN Women and Mexico, we will organize in France, COVID allowing, and it will allow us to pursue the holistic approach in favor of women's rights that we all recommend, with the creation of a dedicated compact on WPS. As regard as concrete recommendation too, I think that as we begin the formal phase of the peacebuilding architecture review, the Commission must take further steps towards women engaged at the community level. And in particular, visits of the chairs of country confederations should be focused on women participation and empowerment. These are two very important elements. Furthermore, at the UN level, across the UN system, we encourage enhanced advocacy across the board. And as a member of the Security Council, once again, as my Irish colleague underlined, we are trying our best to mainstream the agenda, and we will continue to do so and to promote a gender-responsive peace building. And the Peacebuilding Commission must do so too in its interaction with the Security Council. It's very important that the peacekeeping operation address the structural barriers that still marginalize women from peace and security related decision-making process. So the targeted advice that you can propose and the awareness raising that the Peacebuilding Commission can provide will be absolutely key in this regard. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Nathalie. Much appreciated. Now call on the Swiss DPR, Dominique.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I'm very delighted to be here today. I think lots of you already expressed how qualitative and how interesting and important the briefers were today. It's really fantastic that we talk about this right now. The report also brings very insightful messages. I would like to end this introduction to greet you from my PR, Pascal Berisville, who unfortunately cannot be here. On our side, we would like to highlight three aspects from the report that have strongly resonated with us. First, for gender responsive peace building, we need sound data analysis. Access to gender disaggregated data is necessary in order to understand the complex realities of any country and society. It is particularly important where conflict is part of recent history. Through its country-specific and regional discussions, the PBC should foster a nuanced understanding of the factors that impact women's participation in building and sustaining peace. The links between economic empowerment and women's participation in conflict prevention and peace-building activities are one example thereof. Second, diversity and consistency are key in our engagement with women peace builders. Consultative processes with civil society organizations and women's groups, for instance, during field visits, are important. But they are not enough. Back in New York, we need to make sure that the information collected is then also translated into policies and funding decisions. We also take on board the recommendation to broaden the range of women interlocutors beyond the entry points provided by PBF projects. Third, for gender responsive peace building to have a lasting impact, we need to engage men and boys. Delinking violence from a masculine identity is an important consideration in program designs to prevent violence and sustain peace. The PBC is well situated to foster greater awareness and understanding of these aspects across the UN system. Switzerland is committed to translating these insights into action in our engagement in the PBC and through the mandate as chair of the Burundi configuration, but also through our bilateral cooperation programs, as well as within the framework of the 4th National Action Plan for the implementation of Resolution 1325, which we launched in 2018. In Switzerland, civil society has played an important role in monitoring and implementation of this plan, in suggesting improvements, and even as an implementing partner. We deem it equally important for the PBC to engage closely with civil society as we continue to implement the PBC gender strategy. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you so much, Dominic. We look forward to working with you very closely. Next, we have from the US, DPR Chalet. Then from the DR, we have DPR Jones Sedano. And then from Sweden, we have Magnus. So let's keep going.
Ambassador, thank you. And for technical reasons, I'm going to keep my camera off, but it's good to see all of you.
We can remember what you look like. It's okay.
Good. I want to thank you for convening this really important meeting. I also want to thank Rosemary, Undersecretary General DiCarlo, Anita, and all the presenters and the briefers for your remarks. The United States very much appreciates the work that the UN and all of its entities, but especially the Peacebuilding Commission. Oscar, it's good to see you. But the preventative measures and looking at mediation and the role of women is just so important. We very much appreciate the work on this. I also want to say that we appreciate the PBC taking the time to focus on the implementation of its gender strategy, particularly as we approach the 20th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which established the UN Security Council's Women, Peace, and Security agenda, as so many of our other colleagues have commented about already. All the briefers in today's meetings have been inspiring, and so I want to thank you again for demonstrating the critical role that women play in efforts to prevent conflict and build and sustain peace. I want to further thank, along with DPPA, but UN Women for their work to prepare the report on the implementation of the PBC's gender strategy. Steps such as this are critical to ensuring that this body is making the progress on the goals set forth in 1325. And the findings of the report reflect the realities of broader women, peace, and security efforts. While some progress has been made, much is left to be done. I would say that we are pleased to see overall the PBC discussions and conversations have been enhanced over the last few months and years due to more briefings by women peace builders, which include business leaders, ex-combatants, and survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. We really need to ensure that this practice is continued moving forward. It's very critical to amplify the voices of women that are directly affected by conflict and crisis and that are on the front lines of response in our international decision-making processes. I also want to highlight that we must work to turn these discussions and insights, I think, as we've all said, into concrete action and change. And we welcome the opportunities to enact the recommendations set forth in the report. The United States also recognizes that sustainable peace-building efforts cannot be achieved without the full and meaningful participation of women. And we are proud to lead the global efforts on the implementation of UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. And as we've said many times before, when President Trump signed the 2017 Women, Peace, and Security Act, the United States became the first country in the world to pass national legislation enshrining this important effort. And even as we endeavor to strengthen our own domestic women, peace, and security infrastructure and policy framework, we are working with our partners across the globe to support their efforts to advance women's participation in the security sector, in peacemaking and peacekeeping. And in this spirit, the United States welcomes the Peacebuilding Commission's gender strategy, and we acknowledge that the role of women in conflict and peacebuilding is multifaceted. They can be prevention actors and victims, as well as perpetrators. And that's why it's critical that all efforts to build peace and stability around the world address the needs and perspectives of women, men, girls, and boys, and inform decisions based on gender analysis, utilizing sex and age disaggregated data where possible. It is also important that we enhance the role of women as first-line defenders to mitigate cycles of terrorism and conflict. I'll just conclude by saying that the gender strategy's focus on national ownership, inclusivity, and participation reminds us that member states have the primary responsibility for promoting women's meaningful participation in efforts to build and sustain peace. This includes supporting women peacekeepers and ensuring the protection of women and girls in conflict and crisis. Meaningful, sustained engagement between governments, women leaders, and women civil society groups, such as those that take place during the National Action Plan processes, inside women's mediator networks, and during peace processes, can help to lower mistrust and socialize different perspectives on war and peace. It is important that we recognize the disproportionate impact that conflict and crisis often have on women and girls, including in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we are pleased that this report showcases the progress the PBC has made with its gender strategy, and we remain ready and committed to work with the PBC and member states to achieve its goals. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sheriff. That's good to have the support. It means a lot to us. Joan, and then Magnus, and then Chilju Park from Korea.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's also a pleasure to be here, in my case, for the first time. Ambassador and colleagues, it is clear that the PBC plays a key role in advancing the WPS agenda, including by supporting women's leadership in peace building and by working closely with regional and sub-regional organizations in this regard, which is absolutely critical, as our two briefers today have shown. Women's participation in peace and security efforts leads to better outcomes. Mr. Ricardo mentioned this very clearly. But women, and particularly young women, continue to face structural barriers to their participation in peace processes, which contributes to low levels of women's participation as mediators and negotiators in peace processes. By removing these barriers, we can bring about transformative change in support of long-term peace and sustainable development. Now, the COVID-19 crisis exposes inequalities and exacerbates challenges faced by women. It is threatening to reverse the progress we have made in the implementation of the WPS agenda. And as we are taking off to a global response, it is more important than ever to ensure the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women in efforts to conflict resolution and prevention in post-conflict processes. The PBC needs to continue engaging with women in conflict prevention and conflict resolution efforts, also in response to the Secretary General's call for a global ceasefire. The PBC's gender strategy is crucial in mainstreaming gender in all aspects of the Commission's work and further promoting women's participation in peace-building initiatives, and allowed for an increased support for consultations with women's CSOs during PBC meetings and its field visits. However, a more systematic follow-up by the PBC on the gender strategy implementation is needed. In this regard, we also want to thank DPPA, PBSO, and UN Women for their report and look forward for discussing how we can bring forward the recommendations on how to further its implementation. Grassroots women peace builders and their work must be supported, including through capacity building and adequate, predictable, and sustained financing to amplify their voices and address their needs into a formal and informal peace building processes. We also wanted to welcome the PBC financing programming with a strong gender perspective and the increased allocations for gender responsive projects in the peace building context. However, the Dominican Republic encourages the PBF to strengthen gender resourcing and expertise as a recommendation. In line to what you mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, Mr. Chair, the PBC can also play a more active role in enhancing its complementarity in its efforts to support women, peace and security, and the youth peace and security agendas. We think that is absolutely critical. Finally, the Commission must continue to advocate for strong gender dimensions to be an integral part of conflict analysis and planning undertaken by the UN system, and provide critical advice to the Security Council to strengthen efforts to implement the WPS agenda. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Joan. Much appreciated. Sorry, folks, I've just gotten a little bit mixed up here. Whoever thinks they're next should go next.
I think it's me.
I think it's you too. I'm sorry. I lost my place.
Right. So Sweden, thank you, Ambassador. And I want to thank the briefers for their excellent contributions today, and also welcome the representatives from civil society, and thank you for the crucial work that you're doing. As highlighted by numerous leaders, including the SG in his latest WPS report, we now stand at a juncture where we either risk to lose decades of hard-won gender equality gains, or where we can take transformative steps forward. We must do our utmost to pursue the latter. Grassroots activists and leaders, particularly women, continue to take critical steps making our societies more equal and inclusive. And as responsible leaders, actors in positions of power, we must promote lasting change through political and financial action informed by an understanding of the reality on the ground. Sweden welcomes today's discussion as it allows us to understand the close linkages between women, peace and security and sustaining peace agendas. We also welcome the review undertaken on the PBC gender strategy. We have contributed to the review and welcome the findings and recommendations in the report. I would like to make 2 points. First, and has been mentioned also by several other speakers, the report on the gender strategy highlights that important progress has been made since 2016. However, the report also shows that much work remains to be done, including on follow-up, reporting, and feedback when the PBC is engaging with civil society and women peace builders. As Undersecretary General DiCarlo rightly pointed out, it is now up to member states, together with the UN system, to address this gap. This follow-up could include re-inviting civil society briefers to the PBC to update on progress made since their last briefing, as well as creating internal guidelines for the PBC to reference civil society recommendations in PBC outcomes. We welcome the suggestion to develop an action plan to improve monitoring and reporting. Furthermore, the report demonstrates that the PBC is lacking context-specific intersectional gender analysis in its discussions. One way to improve this could be to draw on existing resources. As mentioned in the report, the recommendations from the informal expert group on women, peace and security, the IEG, could be further utilized. And we encourage the PBC and the Secretariat to initiate a closer working relationship with the IEG, which could enable more targeted advice from the PBC to the Security Council. My second point is that Sweden would like to see clear and concrete recommendations to the Security Council ahead of this year's open debate, drawing from the Gender Strategy Report. The PBC is in an excellent position to contribute to women, peace and security implementation, not least through its cross-pillar approaches. WPS implementation must be adequately financed. In this regard, we welcome the approach undertaken by the PBF with a clear commitment to invest in peace-building projects that promotes gender equality, and we hope other funding mechanisms will follow the lead of the PBF. This year, we welcome the WPS month as opposed to the WPS week. And while this might be a more of a practical move, given the virtual format, we believe that it can also constitute a positive shift towards more space and visibility for women, peace and security. Promoting gender equal and inclusive peace processes requires consistent incorporation of women, peace and security in all peace and security related discussions. Lastly, let me once again welcome the review of the implementation of the gender strategy and assure you that you can count on Sweden's continued support going forward to reach full implementation of this important agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Magnus. Next is Chelju Park from South Korea. Then is Guatemala DPR, Omar Castaneda, and then Tom Woodruff. So we'll start with Chelju.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for opening me the floor. First of all, my delegation particularly welcomes the convening of today's timely meeting on women, peace and security at this critical juncture, which marks 20th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325. My delegation is also grateful for the briefing from New York and also from the field Nigeria and Guatemala for their comprehensive and insightful briefing. We note with appreciation the review report on the implementation of PBC gender strategy. We are confident that the entire process of adopting the strategy and reviewing its implementation has contributed to an enhanced gender-responsive peace-building process. However, we have to also recognize that we must continue to accelerate our efforts for its implementation to further achieve concrete outcomes in each specific regional context. Against this backdrop, Republic of Korea would like to highlight the following 3 points. First, we need to further promote equal and meaningful participation of women in the full continuum of peace processes. It is also important to ensure that their voices are heard at the Peacebuilding Commission and beyond. Indeed, gender dimensions should always be well incorporated in all activities and decision-making process of the PBC. In this regard, consultations and engagement with women peacebuilders are highly valuable, and we hope that this can continue to be further expanded and strengthened. The second, my government emphasizes the indispensable role of women in creating the overall performance and effectiveness of peacekeeping operations. In this regard, Korea is exerting efforts to increase representation of women in the uniformed personnel from 17% to 25% by 2028, in accordance with the Uniform Gender Parity Strategy. Recently, the Republic of Korea co-sponsored Security Council Resolution 2538 on women peacekeepers. As spelled out by the resolution, we believe that networks among women peacekeepers and targeted capacity building programs can greatly contribute to scaling up the participation of women in peacekeeping. Furthermore, it is absolutely essential to ensure gender-sensitive working environment for women peacekeepers and elevate our collective efforts to prevent threat and violence against them. This leads to my third point, which is last but not least, the prevention of conflict-related sexual violence and protection of victims is still very critical. The core of protection lies in the survivor-centered approach, which has been recognized by the Security Council Resolution 3467. Necessary support for all victims should be provided, including sexual and reproductive health care service. In this regard, the Republic of Korea is proud to participate in the Global Fund for Survivors of Conflict-Related Sexual Violence. Following the first International Conference on Action with Women and Peace initiative last year, the Republic of Korea will host the second international conference of this kind in November with the theme of survivor-centered approach, and we greatly look forward to your active participation. Mr. Chair, in closing, the ROK has been exerting its elevated effort in advancement of women and peace and security agenda, and will continue to spare no effort to this end. As the host country for the next 2021 Peacekeeping Minister meeting, the Republic of Korea will try to ensure that the voice of women in peace operation will be duly recognized and further contribute to the promotion of women peace and security agenda. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. We're now going to hear from Omar Castaneda from Guatemala.
Muchas gracias, Embajador. Thank you very much, Ambassador Bob. It's such a great pleasure to see you. And of course, first allow me to express my gratitude for convening this important meeting, which comes in a very timely manner, coinciding with significant milestones, including the 75th anniversary of the UN, the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Platform for Action of the 4th World Conference on Women, and of course, the 20th anniversary of the adoption of Security Council Resolution 1325/2001 on women, peace, and security. Thank you very much for the presentations. Thank you to the briefers. And I'm also very honored to see in the screen today to my dear compatriot and friend Irma Sitalan, such a great company today in this important meeting. Mr. Chairman, taking into account also the limitations that we have on time, I would just summarize my briefing or my presentation today. First of all, from Guatemalan perspective, equality between women and men is a fundamental pillar of democratic societies. It is something especially enshrined in the Article 4 of our Constitution. The agenda on women, peace, and security incorporates the gender perspective in the prevention, management, and resolution of conflicts, defending not only the right of women to participate in peace processes, but the sustainable relation between operational and effective peace and the participation of women in the process of its construction. With the adoption of the Resolution 1325 of the United Nations Security Council on Women, Peace, and Security, we understand very clear that this was a culmination of a process that took almost 2 decades, and the states are aware that without the support of civil society, this would not have been possible. Therefore, we consider that the participation of other actors in charge of the matter is extremely important and very valuable. This allows, of course, to have a comprehensive view, a perspective of the situation at local, national, regional, and international levels, allowing states to help to reduce the gaps in the effective implementation of each and every one of the provisions of Resolution 1325. And also this applies in situations of conflict and post-conflict. From Guatemala's perspective, with the adoption of the identical resolutions in 2016 on the Peace Building Architecture Review, the United Nations General Assembly and the United Nations Security Council has strengthened the provisions of Resolution 1325, recalling the important role of women as agents of peace, supporting peace processes. From our perspective, Mr. President, we have implemented national action plans, which are called the NAPs, and these specifically provide a valuable tool for states to implement their commitments to the women, peace, and security agenda, and for civil society to hold them accountable. The national action plans are a practical document that detail the actions that a government is taking to meet its obligations under the UN Security Council Women, Peace, and Security resolutions, and other, of course, international agreed resolutions to ensure that these commitments are translated into concrete, specific policies and programs. The national action plans actually provide a good opportunity for national stakeholders to identify priorities, determine responsibilities, allocate resources, and initiate strategic actions within a defined time frame in order to deliver policies and specific results to programs that respond to the needs and priorities of conflict-affected women. So for us, this is a very important topic that has to be strengthened also from the perspective of the Peace Building Commission. My country, Mr. President, certainly believes that women are agents of change. And we are very proud also to contribute with peacekeepers, women peacekeepers, in different peacekeeping missions that we have participated in Haiti, in DRC, in different countries. We have seen, for example, how women can contribute in different ways to strengthen the capacities of the society, particularly through the quick impact projects in different peacekeeping missions. For us, it's important to highlight this in terms of the work of the PBC, and also to strengthen the mandate of this commission as a platform to convene all relevant actors within and outside the United Nations, including civil society and women's groups, in order to strengthen the women, peace, and security agenda, and share, and of course, develop good practices in peace building, and of course, with the overall objective, which is sustaining peace. Count with our support, and thank you very much again, Mr. President, for allowing me to speak. Thanks. Muchas gracias.
Sorry, I muted myself. It's Tom, it's Gunter, and then it's Jacqueline O'Neill. Tom Woodruff.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I thought it might be me, but I didn't want to take the risk. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for convening this hugely important meeting. It's an extremely valuable review, and we very much welcome and support the recommendations within it. I can be quite brief because a lot of what I have wanted to say has already been said by others, but I did just want to make contribute a few thoughts from the UK perspective, if I may. And I wanted to start actually just by agreeing with the permanent representative of Morocco, who talked about the best practice that the PBC has demonstrated in this area. And I would very much support that. But I think it's of course critically important that we collectively encourage an even more visible and demonstrable commitment to strengthening the PBC's focus on gender in line with the findings of the review, and consider in detail what that actually means in practice. And that might mean, for example, including whether there are reforms to PBC structures or systems that are necessary in order to allow us to do that. And as part of this, the UK would suggest that we could also identify and analyse those areas of PBC activity which currently have no or limited reference or focus on gender, explore why that is the case, and therefore what we need to do to fill the gap. And I think better and more robust data would very much help in that regard. We would also like the PBC to adopt an even more strategic, forward-looking approach in order proactively to identify opportunities to progress more systematically gender equality objectives in the countries we support. And to help in that, we think we need earlier and more regular civil society engagement and advice to help inform us as to how best to deliver that. And finally, we would like to ensure that the PBC's advice to the Security Council routinely includes practical advice on gender issues, including, for example, where we judge the appointment of gender focal points and gender experts is necessary, and how missions should work in a more integrated way with UN country teams to ensure a coherent approach to this agenda. And as others have said, we need to hold ourselves accountable for all of this and for the implementation of the gender strategy and the review's recommendations through regular discussion and feedback from partners and allies on this agenda, and be ready to make further changes and improvements as necessary. And I think I would very much support the suggestion from the Permanent Representative of Ireland of a regular annual discussion to really drill down into this in detail. And finally, and I think this point goes without saying, that throughout all of this work, we must continue to draw very closely on UN Women's hugely valuable and undoubted expertise in this area, as well as their many civil society networks, to ensure our work is robust, rigorous, and focused on outcomes that deliver very real and very tangible impact on the ground. Thank you very much.
Gunter. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much. It's great that we're having this meeting. Like Tom, I can be quite short. I would like to make 4 points. The first one is, if I listen to all of you, I feel we are indeed making progress, and we have come a long way regarding the participation of women and their contribution to peace building. We absolutely welcome Secretary General Guterres' ambition to treat WPS as a high priority. The implementation of Resolution 1325 is a cross-cutting task for the entire UN system, and the Peacebuilding Commission is a key actor in that. For us, that's firm part of our belief. Including women in peace negotiations is not optional, it is a prerequisite for long-term success of any peace agreement. My second point is on WPS and peace building and on the recommendations that the gender strategy evaluation has brought about. We believe that these recommendations are very good. We can fully align with the 4 key suggestions regarding analysis, monitoring, consultations with women peace builders, and advocacy in the UN system at large. The focus, in our view, must now be on implementing and following up on these recommendations. A final point regarding the recommendations that is quite important for us. We must come to appreciate that gender is not only about women and men. We must move beyond that dichotomy and take into account that this is more complex. And here we believe that there is still progress to be made. My third remark is on COVID-19. It is one of the probably most repeated sentences here at the UN, that problems that have existed before are being exacerbated through COVID-19. This is certainly true regarding the amplification of gendered dynamics in conflicts. And this is something that we need to be working on. In the beginning, I was saying that we have indeed made quite a lot of progress overall, but in particular in the context of COVID, we also note and must note that there are still shortcomings, and that there are, even in both in country situations and at the multilateral level, backlashes. My fourth point here is the advertising section. Germany is taking action to transform the Women, Peace and Security Framework into action. I would like to mention a couple of activities that are very dear to us. First one, we strive for the systematic participation of women mediators, women peace builders, and gender experts in peace negotiations. Next Monday, on October the 5th, Germany will host an international conference on women peace builders and women mediators. This is co-organized with friends from the External Action Service, Finland, France, Italy, Norway, Spain, Sweden, UK, the Global Alliance for Regional Women Mediators Network, and the International Civil Society Action Network. So if you can tune in. I would also like to draw your attention to the fact that we are in the process of developing our third national action plan. It pursues a comprehensive and integrated approach in order to strengthen all pillars of the WPS agenda. We are also proud to support the African Women Leaders Network and to be working with UN Women, the African Union, and the AU Envoy on Women, Peace and Security, Benita Diop. Let me underline, like others have done before, how important the cooperation with UN Women is for us in this context. Germany also supported an inclusive process design of the National Dialogue Conference in Yemen, and we are supporting women's initiatives in the context of the Libyan peace process. Finally, we will continue our funding for women in peace processes via our project funding and via the Women, Peace and Humanitarian Fund. As a board member of that one, we are contributing to the strategic focus of the fund, and we are planning to add to the 4 million euros we have already contributed. Thanks a lot, Bob.
Bob, you're muted.
I will unmute. Continual challenge. Jacqueline O'Neill is Canada's Ambassador for Women, and she's going to be speaking on behalf of Canada today. Jacqueline, I'm delighted to have you with us.
Thanks, Bob, and hi, everybody. It's just excellent that the Commission has undertaken this review, and Canada fully endorses the recommendations in the review report. And I know Bob has wonderfully, could not have been more clear about the value of the work, so I'll speak to some specific recommendations. So some of our colleagues have referenced this fact that there are some real striking similarities between the journey of the Peacebuilding Commission and many of our national journeys towards implementation of the principles of women, peace, and security in our own countries. As Anita said, we are now about 85 countries who have developed and often refined over many years our national action plans. And I would offer that there are some insights from these experiences that are relevant here too. And these are insights that many of us, certainly including Canada, have learned sometimes the hard way. So one insight, of course, being that it's essential to have both a North Star type of guiding framework, such as an overarching national action plan, and specific implementation plans to make sure they actually come to life, such as department-specific action plans and monitoring and evaluations plans. So having both is now an established good practice globally. So the Peacebuilding Commission's gender strategy is its North Star, and therefore creating the action plan to make sure it's fully implemented would help assign responsibility and timelines and identify resource gaps. So excellent proposal. A second insight from national action plans that might be relevant here is the real value of providing customized tools to make implementation as easy as possible. And so in that spirit, I think it's a great recommendation that the Peacebuilding Commission and the PBSO develop templates that member states engaging with the Commission could choose to draw upon to guide their engagement. And a further tool that could be used at the country level are tip sheets with questions or gender considerations to help ensure quality in gender analysis. And the Peacebuilding Commission could similarly develop questions that briefers are routinely asked to address when they're preparing their statements. Third insight is about the value of not reinventing the wheel. So specifically on drawing on some solid resources already in the system. And in this case, that would mean implementing the recommendation of having the PBC integrate its work on gender analysis that are already developed for or by the UN, as well as national gender related data collected for the SDGs, the Universal Periodic Reviews, CEDAW national reports, etc. A fourth insight from these 80+ national action plans relates to the invaluable role of civil society, and particularly the importance of having feedback loops. So the most useful relationships, of course, are not just unidirectional flows of information. The report is clear that the PBC has to change its approach in order to deliver on its commitments to consult with women's civil society organizations. And as we do so, to ensure that those who advise us know they're not sort of speaking into a black hole. And so we really agree with the suggestions that women peace builders have made to have dialogue and engagement sustained over a longer period, and suggest that the PBC and PBSO compile those recommendations received and report on their implementation. And these could be tracked using gender disaggregated data and intersectional factors. And then to increase accountability, actual follow-up on these recommendations could be the subject of regular review by the PBC with corrective responses. Doing so would be incredibly powerful, particularly for all of the civil society members who brief this group. And lastly, a final insight from many of these 80+ national action plans is that we get far greater analysis and can design far more effective programs and policies when we take this intersectional approach, meaning we move beyond considering women as a homogenous group. And of course, that's really been brought to life very practically for many of us through the COVID-19 pandemic. So to optimize prevention and response, many of our governments now are looking at not just the proportion of men and women who get the virus, but whether rates are higher for poorer women versus wealthier ones, younger, older, women from different racial or ethnic backgrounds, the type of industries that they work in. This is the type of thing we mean by intersectional approaches, and I think the pandemic has emphasized that we can do it when we want to. And so finally, bringing all these together, the PBC could implement these recommendations and incorporate the results into its advice to the Security Council. And in addition, recommend that the Council in mandates include increasing capacity for national ownership of women's decision-making, greater technical experience at the country level, targeted funding to build the capacity of women's rights organizations and women peace builders, and increased engagement with women's rights organizations and women peace builders during mission transitions. So we just talked about how October is now Women, Peace and Security Month versus just 1 week. Let's go ahead and make it a whole anniversary year of women, peace and security and sustain that focus throughout. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you very much and appreciate it. We have 4 speakers left. From Kenya, we have Ralia Mohammed. From Nigeria, we have Catherine Udida. From Peru, we have Gonzalo Rivera. And from China, we have Mr. Song Li. So with those 4 final speakers, we'll then turn to our briefers to respond. But great to have everyone with us. So Ralia, you're up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. USG Rosemary DiCarlo, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. My apologies from my charge d'affaires, Madam Susan, who could not be able to join us today. And I'm delivering the remarks on her behalf. In the lead up to the 20th century of the Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security, and having just celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration, it is indeed critical to reflect on the achievements made and concrete next steps in further strengthening and meaningfully integrating gender perspective into the UN peace-building architecture. Additionally, it is also important to take stock of the persistent challenges in ensuring the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women at every stage along the peace continuum, including in peace building. The women, peace, and security agenda must indeed be a whole of society and a whole of UN enterprise. The various briefers, including representatives from the various civil society organizations, have indeed further identified important gaps that need to be addressed, particularly the gap between rhetoric and actual implementation. Therefore, beyond reaffirming the significant role women play in sustainable peace building, we, member states, and the United Nations system need to demonstrate a stronger commitment and invest in the localization and operationalization of women and peace and security agenda in the areas of peace building and sustaining peace. During the COVID-19 pandemic, despite the disproportionate impact of pandemic on women, women continue to play an active role as first responders and caregivers. Many women organizations have also been swift in responding to the Secretary General's call for a global ceasefire. Mr. Chair, women participation and leadership in conflict prevention, peacekeeping, and conflict resolution has further established women as informed and efficient agents of change through their role as mediators and negotiators in political and peace operation transition. In regard to concrete next steps that the PBC, in partnership with national stakeholders, can take to further strengthen the integration of gender in its work, I would like to make few observations. First, implementation of 325 and the gender strategy needs to be intergenerational. This is why my delegation has continuously advocated for a 1325-2250 approach in order to ensure women, young boys and girls are protected and continue to participate and partner in the collective efforts of peace building and sustaining peace. The engagement of men, including youth in gender responsive peace building is captured in strategic action 3 of the report, and the Commission can further build on this. On 16th to 18th August 2019, Kenya was honored to host the first ever African Women Leaders Network Intergenerational Retreat in Nairobi in partnership with the African Women Leaders Network, the Office of the African Union Youth Envoy, and the UN Deputy Secretary General, Her Excellency Ms. Amina Mohammed. The objective was to strengthen international
Are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, the objective was to strengthen intergenerational dialogues to allow for women and youth to work collectively in addressing global challenges to peace. Secondly, support and investment need to be geared towards the localization of the gender strategy and WPS national action plans. This will not only allow efficient allocation of resources, it will allow for more comprehensive reporting on grassroots women-led initiatives, including monitoring and evaluation systems that are relevant to the communities concerned. Kenya is in phase 2 of the 325 National Action Plan on Resolution 325 under the auspices of the Ministry of Public Service, Youth and Gender, and our mantra continues to be kuhusisha wanawake ni kuhudumisha amani, meaning to involve women is to sustain peace at every level. And finally, the contributions and initiatives of existing regional and sub-regional bodies need to be further highlighted and their respective recommendations integrated into the work of the UN system, including that of the PBC. Strategic Action 7 of the report touches on this. For my delegation, we have seen the benefits of regional frameworks in fostering a context-based and context-informed peace-building policies and projects, as has been mentioned by Her Excellency Ambassador Fatima. Examples include the Silencing of Guns Initiative, the work of the African Union, FemWise Africa, and the AU Continental Results Framework, CRF, for monitoring and reporting on the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda in Africa. Strengthened systematic coordination, briefings and information sharing needs to happen both between the PBC and Security Council and also between the PBC and regional organizations, including regional economic communities, in order to ensure the Women, Peace and Security Agenda is implemented comprehensively and contextually. I thank you.
Thank you very much. It's now my pleasure to ask Catherine Udita from Nigeria to respond. Catherine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to thank you for convening this meeting. I also want to thank the briefers for their insightful contributions, especially the West African Network for Peace Building, which has been in the forefront of the fight for women's voices to be heard in Nigeria. Let me seize this opportunity to welcome the adoption of a common African position of peace building, particularly as it pertains to women, peace, and security. As highlighted by Her Excellency Ambassador Fatima, we believe it is a step in the right direction towards strengthening the role of women in the UN peace building architecture. We want to acknowledge the effective collaboration of UN Women Nigeria with various women groups in the country in their efforts to ensure full participation of women-led peace building initiatives. These efforts have yielded significant results, especially in the areas of women empowerment, conflict prevention, and early warning. UN Women's support for WANEP and other women advocacy groups has enhanced their participation efforts in peace building and brought to the fore the role of women in peace building. Mr. Chair, women and girls continue to suffer varied forms of abuses, including sexual and gender-based violence, as well as sexual exploitation and abuse in situations of crisis and conflicts. The necessity for women to be engaged in peace-building efforts therefore cannot be overemphasized. In this regard, Nigeria has ensured women participation in issues of peace and security, especially as it relates to the transitional justice system, as women are disproportionately impacted by conflicts. I'm conscious that the participation of women is very important in bringing about better outcomes. Nigeria has encouraged all women groups, especially the civil society groups in the country. Nigeria continues to focus on 3 priority areas of the WPS agenda that strengthens women participation in peace building. This includes prevention of conflict and all forms of violence against women and girls in conflict situations. Secondly, it has increased meaningful representation of women at all levels in the international, regional institutions for the maintenance and peace of security, and also ensure the recovery initiatives in conflict and post-conflict situations as they respond to the need of women and girls, especially in vulnerable situations. We align ourselves with the recommendations that national authorities should promote women leadership in key peace and security positions and in the peace building processes, and should also institutionalize women's empowerment in the development and implementation of the UNSCR 1325 national action plans, and the need for funding of NAPs to be prioritized in national budgetary processes as well as by international actors. We thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. We're now going to hear from Gonzalo Rivera and finally from Mr. Song Li from China. Gonzalo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ambassador. Can you hear me?
I can hear you clearly. And see a beautiful picture behind you.
Yeah, it's a typical picture of Peru. Thank you, Ambassador. First of all, I would like to thank you, Chair, for convening this meeting and the report, and the report circulated on the review of the implementation of the PBC gender strategy, and the briefers for their valuable remarks. This year is particularly important for Women's Peace and Security Agenda, since we celebrate the 20th anniversary of Resolution 1325, by which the Security Council unanimously introduced the subject in the Council agenda. It also coincides with the 75th anniversary of the United Nations and the 25th anniversary of Beijing Declaration, which are central pieces in women's rights framework. It is undeniable the importance of incorporating women and their perspective on the processes of peace building in order to ensure a sustainable peace. However, and nonetheless, this universal understanding among member states, evidence shows us that we must step up our efforts to have the necessary levels of effective, full, equal, and meaningful participation of women. If a peace-building process does not consider women in their double dimension as active agents for peace and beneficiaries of it, it will be limited in scope and results. If we want to speed up the realization of this objective, assuring women participation itself is not enough. This participation has to be meaningful and in equal conditions at all decision-making levels. We welcome the progress made in the gender strategy in peace-building processes. However, as the review report reflects, diversity of women is not duly recognized. We agree that women are not an homogeneous single group, and because of that, their diversity, singularities, and particular needs shall be acknowledged and taken into account. This will be a strong positive impact in advancing YPS agenda. My delegations find the 4 key recommendations proposed in the review report relevant and pertinent for the implementation of the gender strategy. In that regard, their consideration and putting into practice should be an aim of this commission. Furthermore, we would like to highlight the importance of working on accountability. Strengthening it and develop it, monitoring and reporting mechanism is a measure we consider will help greatly for continued advancing in the gender strategy, and as such should be a priority for member states' consideration. To conclude, Mr. Chair, I would like to express my delegation's strong commitment to continue working with other interested states to address the outstanding problems regarding this matter, especially where conflict remains and women and girls are more vulnerable, with the purpose of achieving a peaceful environment where they can enjoy a life free from violence and discrimination. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Mr. Lee, you have the pleasure of wrapping up the country presentation. So I turn the mic to you, Mr. Song Lee from China.
Thank you, Ambassador. It's my honor. Thank you for convening this meeting. I also wish to join others to thank the briefers. This year marks the 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and the 20th anniversary of the Security Council Resolution 13/2025. It's a good time and an opportunity to review and take stock of the achievements and shortcomings in the areas of WPS agenda, so as to identify the right direction for future cooperation and increased consensus. I will be very brief to make 3 points. First, we should commit to seeking political solutions to hotspot issues through dialogue and consultation, and create an international environment conducive to the survival and development of women. It's imperative to secure women's full right to participation and decision-making at all stages of the peace process, while ensuring that women's representatives involved in the peace process truly reflect the voice of women on the ground. Second, we need to address both the symptoms and the root causes of conflicts, effectively strengthen women's capacity building, and ensure their effective participation in the peace process. It's imperative to help women achieve equal development, escape poverty, and access to education, which constitute important conditions for their effective participation in the peace process. It's essential to actively help countries concerned carry out post-conflict reconstructions, focusing on capacity building and sustainable development, and ensure that development benefits all people, especially women. Third, we need to fully respect the sovereignty and will of the countries concerned, and ensure that the various UN agencies can form synergies while leveraging their respective strengths and mandates. Countries concerned shoulder the primary responsibility in promoting women's effective participation in peace process, and should take appropriate measures in light of their national conditions. Relevant bodies such as the Security Council, PBC, ECOSOC, and UN Women should, in accordance with their respective mandates, fully play to their strengths and intensify coordination in a joint effort to promote the important role of women in the field of peace and security. Regional and sub-regional organizations are best informed and can therefore provide targeted solutions. Yesterday, our President Xi Jinping reaffirmed China's commitments and initiatives to promote gender equality and advance the global cause of women's development. China will continue to make contributions in this regard. I thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. We have about 18 minutes left by my count. I'd like to give the briefers an opportunity to respond, and I may have a couple of words to say of my own at the end, very briefly, before the bewitching hour of 1 o'clock. So I'm going to call on the briefers in reverse order, starting with Irma and Patience, then going to Ambassador Fatima, Anita Bhatia from UN Women, and closing with Oscar, who's going to be subbing for Rosemary. So I'll start with you, Irma. Is there something you'd like to say, and I stress briefly, in response to what you've heard today?
Thank you very much. It has been very important to listen to all the comments and see the strong commitment of the missions to the peace-building agenda. I also am grateful to share our perspective from Guatemala, from Latin America. I would like to remark 3 points. 1, the need to increase investment on sustainable women builder peace building gains. In Guatemala, the PB Gender Promotion Initiative has been the only fund that has invested in in women peace building leadership, in their access to justice and transformation reparations. There is a need to monitor how the gender maker is applied by strengthening the partner with UN Women, whose triple mandate is key to advance women's rights. 2, complement the funding with support of the resources embassies have at local level, in particular, the European Union, Sweden, Canada, United States, and Germany, because resources are not enough to accompany political and struggles. Both financial and political support are needed to increase a sustainable transformation and combat racism, discrimination, and injustice. Finally, I would like to thank you for opening this space for me in representation of indigenous women. Listening directly from women as key partners for peace building must always be part of the agenda. Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias to do, Irma. We're so pleased to have you join us. It's very meaningful to hear from you directly. Thank you so much. We're now going to hear from Patience.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for convening this very strategic meeting. And thanks to everyone that has made credible contributions to moving the WPS agenda forward. The meeting has indeed been very strategic, and from my end, I've learned so much. I'm very grateful for the opportunity given to me. I would like to end by re-emphasizing, firstly, the need to strengthen strategic funding to local women peace organizations at the local level, particularly through the PBF and PBC. I've not heard much on preventing violent extremism. I would like funding to get to local women so they are able to put forward initiative to prevent violent extremism, with a key security issue in Nigeria. Secondly, there is need for support for youth-led efforts, seeking to see how we can integrate the WPS agenda and the YPS agenda so that no one is left behind to ensure holistic peace-building efforts. Thirdly, there's need to address the need for database for documentation of human rights violations and sexual and gender-based violence against women and girls. We see that recurrent during this COVID-19 era. So there's need for us to see how we can improve interventions to end the trend of violence against women and girls within communities. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I'm glad to be part of the briefers.
Thank you for joining us, Fatima. It was Patience. It was a very, very, very valuable to have you with us. It's very meaningful. Now I'm going to ask Ambassador Fatima Kyari Mohammed if she has a couple of comments at the end.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for giving me the floor once again. Not much to add on this end. I just want to say that I'm really encouraged by the comments and the feedback, particularly from member states that we've heard today. And of course from the briefers who bring in very concrete perspectives on the reality of some of their commitments on the ground. And I look forward to the next steps of this process and working very closely with the PBSO and the Peace Building Commission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Anita?
Thank you very much, Chair. Let me just say that I found this discussion to be really meaningful, really strategic, and really encouraging. I'm really delighted personally to see the strong political support for the WPS agenda, and I'm really looking forward to the PBC messages that will be in the lead up to the Security Council open debate on the 29th of October. I also really want to thank our civil society partners because I think their voice is unique and essential. Just a few reflections, Chair, if I may. First and foremost, I think we heard very clearly the need to move to action. We have a review of the implementation of the gender strategy. It's pretty clear. I think the diagnosis has been done. It's now time to move to action. UN Women is so proud of its partnership with PBSO and the PBC, and I just want to recommit in unequivocal terms our partnership to further the agenda and to work jointly, if that's the conclusion, on the action plan. If we do end up with that action plan, which I think is very key, I would ask that we think very specifically about targets and about timelines, and that we bring a sense of urgency to this. Because, Chair, the pandemic is a portal into a new and a bolder world. But in order to not fall into inertia and go back to doing things the way we have been doing them, I think we really need to bring a sense of urgency to this agenda. I do want to pick up on the point made by some on national ownership. I think the country level ownership is really key. And frankly, you could think of this as a litmus test for UN reform. You know, the SG has a very clear priority around gender equality. How is this translating into country level work? We need to ask ourselves, is UN reform showing up for the WPS agenda as well? I think we also heard very clearly that having women at the table is a sine qua non of lasting peace processes. Having lasting peace processes is a sine qua non of good societies. Having good societies is a sine qua non for SDGs. So this is really also a litmus test of our ability to deliver on the SDGs. And then last point on civil society, which I think is critical. UN Women is coming out with a policy brief on civil society. And in this we will show, as we've been hearing from anecdotal evidence, that civil society really has been decimated by the pandemic. So I think there is an urgent need to continue to invest in civil society, in women's movements, because they ground truth, everything that we may be hearing. And there is this ground truthing from civil society and young people is fundamentally important. Generation equality gives us an opportunity to work collectively to really push on this agenda. UN Women stands ready to play its role, and we are really energized by today's discussion because we feel that we can have a breakthrough in terms of real change, notwithstanding challenges, as some mentioned in the normative zeitgeist, shall I call it. But I think we can be very practical, not let perfection stand, not let the perfect be the enemy of the good, seize the opportunities, be creative, and really push ahead. Thanks, Chair, back to you.
Oscar, to you, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, it has been a very engaging, a very passionate, and I think an extremely substantive contribution by all the briefers and the many member states that participated. Just to say a very, very few words, and picking up from Anita's maybe last point, it is extremely important that women who do this critical grassroots peace building work, such as Mrs. Koyoy and Mrs. Ikpe, must not just be consulted, but heard. not just be invited, but included and be considered as partners and not as beneficiaries. And I think if I took some clear reference from the many that spoke, we need to go beyond the rhetoric. And we are celebrating 20 years of this resolution. That translation of the theory into practice really has two crucial vectors here. One is the work of the Peace Building Commission. We have this joint review report on the implementation of a gender strategy. This is the only intergovernmental body that has a gender strategy. We now need to move forward, as was stated, by having clear implementation targets and seeing how the multiple streams of work and this extremely important agenda, women, peace, and security, is translated into action through the PBC's own work, through its advisory function to the Security Council, but also, and as Anita, I think, was referring to hold this notion of accountability. At the end of the day, it is also an issue of accountability. Who is doing what, with which resources, and with what means? And here, I believe that expanding the action of the Peace Building Commission and using this work, this body of work, to also inspire the possible work on the youth, peace, and security dimensions of our work, and also to consider the PBC's partnership with the World Bank and bring in this gender lens into that partnership and translating a lot of the challenges that we referred to today into concrete action. Just for us, I think the importance of gender and conflict sensitive analysis, but translating analysis through this data into concrete funding, and concrete funding to build up the capacities of government, but also to build up the capacity of civil society organizations. And in this respect, again, just to thank the many member states who contribute to the Secretary General's Peace Building Fund. This has a very proven track record of performance, as Rosemary stated in her presentation. And the reason this happens, the reason we are able to allocate 40% of our funding to gender empowerment and equality programs is because we have a determined use of a gender marker system, the use of gender disaggregated budgets and data, and the reporting requirements. So this is a decision-making instrument that allows us to channel the funds that go from rhetoric into practice. 40% literally means that from 2017 to 2019, $200+ million went straight into supporting this very important agenda. And as many have stated, a key issue going forward is to address the issue of resourcing, and we will have other sessions to address this. A last point, we will be circulating and sharing with the membership of the Commission an update on how the Peace Building Fund has been working very closely with UN Women and many other agencies to streamline, to mainstream this work, to support the UN reforms, and to translate, again, a lot of the planning instruments into concrete action on the ground. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Oscar. Just a few moments before wrap up to thank Oscar and the PBSO team for all the work that they've done, to thank the UN Women and all others who've consulted with us on the report, the response, to thank all of you and your governments for responding, to thank our presenters and briefers very, very much. We will be circulating an action plan, and I will be sharing with you what I intend to talk to the Security Council about on behalf of the Commission at the end of October. In addition, I just want to point out that we're going to have a continuing set of briefings this month and next. And we're also going to be doing some work before the end of the year on the fund and also on the overall budgeting future of the organization. I think it's critically important that we remember the dictum that strategy without resources is best called hallucination. And we therefore have to continue to talk about the issue of resources and how they are allocated. I really want to stress in conclusion two things. How far we have come in changing the nature of the debate, no longer justifying the approach, but documenting it, and to what extent these issues have been accepted and embraced by a great many governments, which is critical as we go forward. But also to stress that we have a long way to go. And so we need to understand the value of the report, the value of the comments from many about what next steps we have to take in terms of accountability, in terms of implementation, in terms of the complete and full integration of the gender intersectionality lens on everything that we do. I embrace this completely as your chair, and I'm delighted that we have had this discussion today. I think it's been productive. I think it's been informative. I think it's been open, it's been candid, and it's going to help us to move forward. So, muchas gracias, merci beaucoup. Thank you, miigwech, to everyone. Thank you so much for your participation and your full attendance and engagement. And à la prochaine. See you soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, Bob. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Oscar.